Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you. Hi, I'm Mary Margaret Frank. If you don't know who that is, I am proudly Dean of Kenan-Flagler Business School. And I, if you don't know, have been here since August 2023. So moving into the third year and thrilled to be here. And I'm really thrilled to be here to introduce our keynote speaker, Reggie Townsend. We got to have a brief moment earlier to talk with each other, and I am not just excited for you all, I'm excited for the world that we have somebody coming to speak with us about a topic that's really, really important. And we'll get into that in just a second. But last month, many of you, I hope, were at the Kenan Institute of Private Enterprises Frontiers of Business Conference. And at that conference, the leaders across the country came to understand the intersection of, we think about artificial intelligence, innovation, and what that means for our skills gap. I feel like every time we turn around these days, there's some piece of news that says we don't have what we need to have. And I think one of the things that concerns me about that is what message is that sending, what fear is that creating in human beings? There's the strategy that we have to tackle, but there's also the fear that it creates, because we're all human, right? And so if we think about continuing that theme from the Frontiers Conference about the skills gap, and in this session, Reggie's going to explore what's, I think, actually the most important thing we need to be talking about, which is what is ethical. Excuse me, that came out a lot louder than I expected. Don't lean into the mic, Reggie, okay? Let me repeat, ethical, human-centered innovation, and what that looks like. We've had constant innovation over centuries. Is this any different? Right? Is this innovation any different? Should we treat it any differently? But in the end, innovation, is it innovation for innovation's sake, or is it to serve a purpose, a human purpose? So as businesses race to adopt AI, Mr. Townsend's perspective, I'll call him Reggie, right, on what does it mean to be responsible? Right? How do we live in a world to create responsible innovation? It is the perfect follow-up to our Frontiers Conference as we think about aligning ethics, equity, and opportunity with innovation. So if you don't know Mr. Townsend, he is Vice President of Data Ethics Practice at SAS. So you have the opportunity to hear from someone who's a leading expert at a leading firm thinking about these things. He leads the responsible innovation, leading global efforts. So this is not just a U.S. problem. This is a world problem. This is a society challenge. Maybe let's change the word. Instead of problem, let's call it challenge. And he's thinking about how to help employees, employers, customers deploy data in a way that is for the well-being and agency and equity of, again, people. We'll keep coming back to that, people. And so I'm excited for the insights he has for today, given he has more than 20 years of experience in strategic planning, program management, consulting, and business development. He's been thinking about change and its impact on people and society for a long time. So I am thrilled to have Reggie here today. If you could please help me welcome him. Thank you.
Am I good? All right. So I have two things in my hand here today. Typically, I get to just roam free, so just, we're going to check my dexterity here this afternoon. I want to start by first saying thank you. Gratitude is often overlooked in society. And so I just want to say I'm thankful to be here with you all. I'm hopeful that I'll share some things that might be meaningful to you, for you. And then hopeful that we'll share some things with you in the end, together. I want to start by saying that I don't have it all figured out. And anyone in this space who tells you that they do, I want you to run as fast as you can in the other direction. All right? I also want to say thank you. Apparently, this is obviously a full house, and so thank you for coming and spending your time with us this afternoon. I had a colleague reach out and tell me that they heard about me speaking at UNC today. Now, mind you, I have an opportunity, the great fortune of going literally around the world and talking about this stuff. And so this colleague said they heard about me coming to speak here, listening to the local NPR, all right? National Public Radio, for those of you who don't know that acronym. And so just as a side conversation this weekend, as I was telling my wife, reminding my wife that I was coming down to North Carolina, and I said, yeah, a colleague told me that they heard it on NPR, so, clearly they're advertising. Hopefully, we'll have a nice turnout. And she does one of these. She says, NPR? You were on NPR? Now, mind you, again, I get to go all over the world. Some trips, she even joins me. So I just thank you. I don't know, was that you, Dean Frank? I mean, if so, thank you for looking out and making a brother feel cool at home. All right, so obviously, I'll talk a little bit about AI today. That is the subject du jour. I'll talk a little bit about society today because that's where AI is showing up, and we've got to talk about that intersection. Let me talk to you a little bit about a company called SAS over in Cary, because that's who I work with and for. For those of you who don't know, we're a data and AI company. We help organizations turn data that's messy and complex into something that is a lot more meaningful for them to make confident decisions, right? That's been our whole deal. Starting off in 1975. So next year, 1976, I'm sorry, next year we'll be 50 years old as a company. So why that's important is that the sort of things that we've been up to for 50 years, people, is the kinds of things that we are talking a lot about now. So this isn't new to us. So I just want to kind of stress that. Now, my role in the company, as was said earlier, I lead this thing we call the Data Ethics Practice, which basically means that I focus on responsible innovation and what that means around the world. And so I'll unpack that for us. But at the end of it all, what it, and Dean said it as good as I could, our focus really is about trying to find ways to make sure that AI is used in ways that are human-centered, right? And what I mean by that is that I want to make sure that AI is used to promote human agency, equity, and well-being. Full stop. That's my deal. Now, there clearly is a lot of conversation about AI taking place throughout the world, and hopefully what I'll share with you is a nuanced perspective. I am neither kind of utopian, nor am I dystopian. I am neither completely optimistic, nor am I completely pessimistic. the world just doesn't work well that way when we think in binaries. And this is an area where we cannot afford to think in binaries. So I don't think that we're going to have, the great society where computers do all the things for us and we just sit on the beach and write poems. Nor do I think that we are going to inherit a society where we are subservient to droids and, we are some science fiction movie. But I do think that it is healthy to think about extremes. Because if you can imagine extremes, then you can imagine the things that you don't want to be. And then you can figure out how to get somewhere in the middle to avoid the extremes that you know you don't want. And so that's where I'm going to spend some time. Now, before we go too far into the future, though, I want to spend some time on what's happening right now. Let's spend some time on the present. I'm going to share a little bit of backdrop for you. AI right now is largely a conversation. If you pick up your trade magazines, if you get on the web, if you look at any information about AI, usually you're going to come across these 7 companies. They're called the Max 7. I'll name them for you: Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA. Throw Tesla in there. They're taking up a lot of space right now in the conversation. And for good reason, right? They account for 40% of the total S&P market capitalization right now. 40%. 7 companies, 40%. 7 companies out of 500, 7 companies, 40%. It's a lot, and good for them. Now, as this chart will show you, at the end of October, we just ran this, their valuation has surpassed the entire GDP of both China and the EU, the European Union, in 2024. Anybody know how many countries are in the European Union? How many? 27 countries are in the European Union. And China's no slouch. This translates into not just paper money, but this translates into influence. Right? Influence over economies, governments, policies, products that show up in our homes, in our pockets. And it also means that a very, very, very small, did I say very already? A very small number of people have an incredible amount of power over not just the technology, but how the technology is showing up in our lives. 2, 4, 6. You sit here, there will be 7 people just at that table. I just want you to get a visual of that, right? By the way, that number doesn't include OpenAI, which is not a public company yet, which at the end of October maneuvered their ownership structure so that they can eventually go public. Get this. They're looking to value the company coming out of the gate at $1 trillion. I said trillion. Get a grasp of this, people. There's a lot of influence that comes with $1 trillion. Now, there may be arguments over, whether or not we've got an AI bubble, an argument over the level of influence that I'm even suggesting. But I don't want there to be argument about this. I am an AI enthusiast. I think it's great. I think we can do a tremendous amount of good in the world. But we have to do it. We, us. Not 7 people, us. And so I want to talk today about us. I want to talk about what some governments are doing as well. And not just when it comes to things like regulations and frameworks, but actual implementation and operation of AI. So I'm going to play a quick video for you, and I'll pause it somewhere midway through. But I'm trying to provide a little bit of background and context for y'all.
Our next story is from Albania. It's a small Balkan nation. They have a minister named Diela. She's currently pregnant, and she's set to deliver 83 babies. 83. Says who? Their prime minister. If that's a little alarming or unbelievable, wait till you hear this. Diela is not human. She is an AI minister, and yes, she is giving birth to 83 so-called children, 83 virtual babies. If you thought 2025 couldn't get any stranger, well, think again, because apparently even female robots can't escape the pressure to do it all. So how did we get here? Our story began in January this year. Albania introduced Diela to the world. She is a text and voice-based chatbot. She is available on Albania's government services portal. Diela was built in collaboration with Microsoft. Her job was simple: help citizens access official documents, answer bureaucratic questions, and streamline government paperwork. Basically, all the stuff that humans hate doing. Then in September, Diela got a promotion. She got the position of Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence. She became the world's first AI cabinet member. What was the logic behind it? Albania kept it simple. You can't bribe an algorithm. You can't threaten it either, unless, of course, you decide to unplug it. But jokes aside, this country has long been plagued by corruption. So Diela was like a ray of hope, a minister immune to human vices. And all of this was fine until this announcement was made that Diela was pregnant. The news was declared by Albania's Prime Minister himself. His name is Edi Rama. He says his AI minister would give birth to 83 virtual assistants. And what would they do? Well, they'll be assigned to each MP of his party, the Socialist Party. Each of these so-called children will act as a digital aide. They will attend parliamentary sessions, they will take notes, and even remind MPs of whom to counterattack in debates. Think of it as ChatGPT meets Parliament. But there's a small problem. Article 100 of Albania's constitution. It clearly states that all ministers must be natural persons. Diela, of course, is not one. She is not human. She does not hold citizenship. So technically, she is a minister by decree. And the reality is murkier. Who do you blame when an AI minister makes a bad call? Do you blame the coder, the politician, or the AI itself? Experts also warn about transparency on how her algorithms work. She may be fighting corruption, but what if there is bias in her own data? What happens then?
So I'll stop it there. You would probably be tempted to think when I first started that video that, oh, this is a deep fake. Dude, you should stop. Stop spending time on YouTube, dude. But that's real. Now, we can certainly make a conversation about being gimmicky. But what we cannot do is question the vision. What we should not do is question the benefit. What we also should not do is overlook the potential downsides. So we've got to be able to wrestle with all of these realities at once. And those of you as future leaders of business, those of you who are shaping the minds and thoughts of future leaders of business, this is the environment that you are walking into. As I said, I get a chance to talk to folks around the world about this stuff. And while a lot of the U.S. headlines, and understandably so, are dominated by U.S. stuff, and we got a lot of stuff right now, this is going on. Albania is roughly, in terms of population, about the size of Chicago, my hometown. Okay? Now, we can talk about another country roughly the same size, Estonia, that is doing remarkable stuff with their e-services. Right? But having the right level of trusted infrastructure in place, the right level of law, legal structure, operational capability, and importantly, culture cannot be overlooked. One thing that I also notice when I go to countries literally all over the world is, one thing I find in common is that we all have mirrors. So I want to talk about mirrors for a second, metaphorically, because they're universal. I want you to imagine standing in front of a mirror right now. And I know everybody in here did today because you all look good. So everybody has been in a mirror today. It's a simple object, right? We look at it, reflects back. Now, at one point in time, the mirror was a revolutionary innovation, if you can believe that or not. At one point in human history, the earliest mirrors weren't manufactured like the ones that you and I looked in today. They were found in pools of water, in polished obsidian, and burnished copper, right? These reflective surfaces, they fundamentally changed how humans understood themselves. Now, I'm going to argue that today we stand in front of a new kind of mirror. We just happen to call it artificial intelligence. And like those first reflective surfaces, AI is changing how we see ourselves, how we understand our capabilities, and importantly, how we envision our future. So as a result, when I look at data these days, I don't just see numbers and patterns anymore. I see our recorded existence. Every click, every purchase, every search query, they all tell a story about who we are as individuals and as a society. AI uses data, you know. And so when AI uses this data, it's reflecting us back to ourselves. And sometimes it does it with startling clarity. A colleague was sharing some information literally about me earlier. He prompted the co-pilot to go and find information about the way I write and the way I talk, and I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God, this is spot on. Startling clarity. But sometimes it also does it with distortion. This morning and yesterday, my wife sent me some Instagram links, as she often does. And it was troubling because there were these deep fake images of African American women being stereotyped using some of the latest models available that look really convincing now. And the stereotypes were just tropes of disinformation that are being disseminated in our society perhaps even created by people outside of our society, to stoke anger and frustration and increase anxieties in our society. And it troubles me. It troubles me because those women look like my wife. They sound like my nieces. And someone has the audacity to put their bodies in danger with the use of technology. So that frustrates me. AI magnifies us, our wisdom and our short-sightedness, our brilliance and our biases. So when AI produces so-called biased results, it's not a technical failure. It's often revealing the biases and the beneficiaries that we've embedded in our cultural practices. Now again, the question before us isn't whether we should use AI. That has been answered. We should. It is here. It is a reality. Do not put your head in the sand. The question before us is, how do we make sure that AI can be used to make the world a better place for all of us? And I happen to think that that should be the animating question for all of technology, not just AI. I believe that responsible innovation has to begin with responsible innovators who have the courage and the conviction to pursue a compelling vision for the future. And that future has to include all of us. We have no choice. The most compelling visions are those in which people see themselves flourishing. Which means that when we innovate, we have to do so in ways that demonstrate dignity, that demonstrate trust, and that demonstrate empathy. Now, the pursuit of an answer to the question has to begin with an understanding of what responsibility truly entails. Now, I'm going to argue this. I think responsibility should be defined as our duty to care. I'm going to say that one more time. Responsibility is our duty to care. It's about accepting ownership for our actions and their consequences, both those that are intended as well as those that we can't foresee. This responsibility is on multiple levels. It's on a personal level, which is the choices that we make as individuals and how we choose to interact with others in society. It's on a professional level, which is about how we interact with things like standards. And it's on a social and society level. We talk a lot about social contracts, right? This is about the agreements that we make about the values that we have to embody collectively as a society in order for us to exist peacefully, civilly together. Now, I'll get a little poetic on you for a second. Not everything that is faced can be changed. But nothing can be changed until it is faced. And we have to reckon with the reality. We have innovation in artificial intelligence that is moving at an extremely rapid pace. I would argue that it is outpacing our ability to receive it and use it productively, meaningfully. We have to face that. And we have to struggle with, do we want to speed up culture? Or do we want to slow down technology? Because the more the gap widens, the more my wife will have to send me those frustrating videos. There are all sorts of approaches that governments are taking right now to try to deal with this. Some governments are a little more vigilant than others. In the EU, of course, they introduced the European Union AI Act. In the UK, they're dealing with this thing they call critical adaptability because they want to make sure that they, stay on the right path with the technology companies. South Korea, they've got the AI Basic Act. There's work going on in Brazil, Canada, the African Union. Just left the Middle East. There's a ton of work going on in Dubai and Saudi around this topic. And even here in the United States, where we've got kind of this patchwork of laws cropping up. But right now is not a time where we can turn over everything to the government. Right now is an all-in moment. And if we believe that we're on the precipice of a society reshaping technology, while government has to be included, has a role to play, government alone cannot and should not be solely responsible for this dilemma. There's a role for all of us. Folks like me in industry, folks like you in academia, civic organizations, and yes, government as well. We all have some choices to make here. Again, no heads in the sand right now. I was talking to some friends about, the moment that we find ourselves in here in the U.S., kind of the regressive nature of society. And, when you're younger and maybe in feeling more safe, there's a tendency to be bold in one's mind. Like, if I was back then, I would have, they wouldn't have done that to me, right? We have those kind of thoughts and conversations. And then I said, well, now's your time, brother. This is your civil rights movement, right? The reason that I got into the space of responsible and trustworthy AI was because I wanted to avoid Jim Crow 3.0. Now is my time. So I'm taking the mic and I'm saying what has to be said. And maybe one day my son and his children, that's a really hard thought. Maybe they'll be able to look back and say, yeah, I remember when AI was coming on the scene. And my dad and his cohort got out there and they got on stages and they talked to people about how people have to be involved in this conversation, how we cannot leave it up to just governments and companies alone, because we all have different incentive structures, right? So maybe they'll say that about us. Maybe they'll say about you, man, I remember I heard about that group at UNC that came out of Kenan-Flagler, and they ripped up the world when it came to technology and ethics. Maybe they'll say that about you. Now, mind you, the world that you're walking into as leaders, some of those folks out there want us to believe a few things. They want us to believe that our choices are binary. And again, I like to see the extremes because I need to know what I don't want to do. But I have to realize that my choices aren't binary and neither are yours. Some are positioning protection or progress, caution or courage, regulation or innovation. This framing is not merely incorrect, y'all. It's a lie. It's just a flat out lie. And it's a lie that we tell ourselves to avoid the harder truth, that the middle part is messy. It is. And as much as we like to create heroes and villains, sometimes you just got to get in the middle and realize, that there's some redeeming quality about the villain. And it makes us sick to our stomachs. I get it. But the middle part is messy. I'll get poetic on you again. The river and its banks are not enemies. Right? The banks without a river, well, that's what we call a ditch. Right? The river without the banks, that's what you call a flood. You need insurance for that. They coexist, just like protection and progress. They coexist. Just like regulation and innovation, they coexist. Responsibility represents that delicate balance between all-out freedom and obligation, right? It's the stuff we've learned as children. It's the stuff we teach our kids. Nothing's changed, right? These are two ideas that we have to hold at the same time, right? You cannot choose one over the other. Of course, we cherish our freedom. We cherish the ability to innovate and to create and push boundaries, to be on the frontier and all the things that we hear about coming out of my space, right? I'm a technologist. I mean, that is us saying those things. Yet with that freedom, there comes an obligation to consider the ripple effects of our innovations across all of society. And true responsibility isn't about just limiting creation. It's about creating with intention and with foresight and with care. Now, in the context of AI, responsibility means acknowledging that when we build these systems, that we can make decisions that ultimately affect human lives. We've got to make sure that we are prepared to remain accountable for the decisions that are made, right? The algorithms might do the execution, right? They might execute the judgment. But the values that get embedded in the algorithms, right? The choices about what data to use, what outcomes to optimize for, what safeguards to implement or not implement, those are all human choices. We get to make those right at the desktop, right? And for those choices, we bear responsibility. This is why AI is so intriguing. This is why it's such an intriguing kind of ethical landscape. It's because we stand at this crossroads. You hear a lot about it, this potential versus this risk, right? Talked about it earlier with the Mag 7. I talked about $16 trillion being contributed to the global economy by 2030 as a result of AI. That's great potential. Talking about advances in healthcare. Talking about advances in government. That's great potential. And it's not theoretical. Like SAS, my company is doing this work. We are doing work with folks like Erasmus Medical Center in the Netherlands. I go visit my good buddy, Dr. Van Hunderen, right? And he's a clinician. He's working with patients, making sure that they can get healed and home. And he's using AI to help them do some of that work, right? So I was there earlier this year with the World Health Organization, and we were talking to WHO about what we're doing, and they're trying to adopt some of that stuff. And so the whole idea is to be able to propagate what we're finding and make it available to more people so we can get more people healed and more people home, right? That's good work, and I want to support that. We do a lot of work with banks and insurers, right? Making sure that our digital identities aren't compromised, right? So all the work around fraud. So if you're outside using your credit card, or someone else is using your credit card, we're going to shut it down. Why? Because it's important that your dollars stay in your pocket. That's good work, and we use AI to do that. All right? It's all good work. These are real advances that will, if they haven't already, have very real positive effects on very real lives. I'm proud of that. But alongside those promises is obviously profound risk, which we've talked about a lot already, right? How we can amplify biases and existing inequalities and concentrate power in the hands of a few. Those are all the downsides, right? So we have to contemplate that, plan for it, and mitigate for it, right? That's now our responsibility. But importantly, we can't allow just a few, a small handful, to make those decisions for all of us. We all have to get into the conversation. We all, in that sense, have to be innovators. And I believe we are. You know, this centralization of power and resources, it isn't just problematic from an equity standpoint, but it also threatens AI itself, right? If the AI isn't developed and representative of the diversity of the world, guess what? The diversity of the world is going to reject it, right? When I see that the global north has literally 89% of the data centers, it shouldn't be surprising that we're starting to have issues around languages, right? And people not being able to communicate meaningfully in their home language using large language models. That's an issue, right? Now, we all are in this together, and we all have some road to climb, right? Some stairs to climb. As a proof point, global trust right now in AI is relatively low, and that's in part because of the fear piece that the dean talked about earlier, right? Every layoff gets blamed on AI, and so now people are concerned that AI is coming for everybody's job. Stop it. That is not true. It's just not true. I work in this stuff every day. I've yet to see AI sufficient enough to take anybody's job, like whole job. Right? So we have to stop saying that because we're scaring the hell out of people. And when we scare the hell out of people, guess what they don't do? Buy your stuff. Right? It's really that stupid simple. The path to a trustworthy AI is not mysterious. It requires three things: a shared risk, shared reward, and shared responsibility. And when the burdens of AI development, things like privacy risk and job displacement and all that sort of stuff I talked about, are borne by one group, while the benefits flow primarily to another, guess what happens? You erode trust. Right? So we've got to figure out a way collectively to get into the conversation to build trust. Not that you can go out and buy AI. Maybe you don't want it. Maybe you don't need it. That's cool. But I can't have you being afraid. And I'm just here to give you a little bit of confidence around this stuff. Because when both the challenges and the opportunities are distributed more equitably, when stakeholders from like diverse backgrounds have a meaningful input into the development, we can see not only the AI flourish, but the trust flourishes as well. And then the people can flourish as a consequence. That's how you get to Estonia e-services, where people are really excited about AI in their public services. They're excited about completing their tax forms at the end of the year. Because why? Everything is pre-populated. 3 minutes, boop, I'm done, off for my day, right? But you can't do that in an environment of distrust. We have a little ways to go here in the U.S., I'm sorry to say, all right? So if it's not clear, again, I'm not utopian or dystopian. I'm not here to sell you any great vision on any given extreme. But I will say this, there are many, many examples that we can point to throughout human history where different people groups have been purposefully left behind. This is another one of those possible moments. And so I need all of us to be using all of our voices to make sure that people are not left behind, and that includes you. Okay. All right. I was going to talk to you a little bit about a wordplay, responsibility versus responsibility. So responsibility obviously focuses a lot on ownership and accountability, like I talked about earlier, but response, wordplay, ability, wait for it, it's coming. This is about our ability to do something in response to AI. So I just briefly want to touch on this notion of AI governance. And responsibility is just, it's a concept that simply says that because we have this emergence, this technology that's still emerging, we have to find ways to not do it, to not ask for it to be perfect, but rather to accept its fallibility, to know that it is not perfect, to know that it will fail, to expect some of its failure modes, and to put paths for mitigation in place to address those failures, right? So that's the general idea around that response ability. AI governance right now is becoming an essential topic in corporate America. So it's those of you all who are, coming out of B school soon, you're going to be walking into an environment where people are talking a lot more about this notion of AI governance, not at the kind of national legislative level, but from a corporate self-governance perspective. And governance is not new to corporations, right? We have boards of directors that govern organizations everywhere. Now they're adding this to their plates. So this notion of AI governance becomes really exciting for me, and it's a space where I'm spending a lot of time as well. We've got products that we do in that space. We've got advisory and consulting that we do in that space. So we're leaning heavily into that for ourselves. The maturation of this governance ecosystem is crucial because effective oversight requires not just people, but at some point it does require infrastructure, right? And so you all, I'm sure at some point in your B school lives will hear the whole notion of people, process, technology. So you've got to have those three layers, and so AI governance is a part of that. So it's just important to know that each of us, irrespective of our technology backgrounds, will have a role to play vis-a-vis AI governance. And so you should expect that once you come out into industry, you'll be dealing with some of that. Again, I think that we are all innovators. We all have the ability to exact change on something that already exists. That's all that innovation means. It's not reserved for those with technical degrees, over in the College of Engineering. Business people are innovators as well. And so just know that as you walk out of this place, that you will be expected to continue to innovate or to help the innovation continue to flow wherever you land. The tech mavens, they don't know it all. Again, if they tell you that they do, you need to run fast in the other direction. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I know I've got probably -4 minutes at this point in time. Just know this, folks. You hear a lot about the variety of foundation models for the most part, the big ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, but there are thousands of AI tools that exist out in the world today, and you've got to get comfortable with that reality. Again, no need to become a technologist, but you do need to get comfortable with technology. That is a reality of today's marketplace. No need to be afraid of it. Take control of it. Know that you have a significant role to play, and if you haven't played around with this stuff, start playing. Most of the stuff is free to start anyway. It's like a good drug dealer. They get you hooked on the first one. Not that I know anything about that. I did say I'm from Chicago, y'all. All right. To be effective in this time of emergence, though, it's going to require a few things of you. Open-mindedness, fluidity, and something that the dean and I talked about earlier, which is this notion of ethical inquiry. So I'm going to give you 3 questions, and then I'm going to stop talking, and then we're going to have a Q&A. The first question is, for what purpose? For what purpose effectively says, why am I doing this? What's the why in all of this? What am I doing and why am I doing it? All right. So, for what purpose? The second question is, to what end? How far am I prepared to take this? What are my success thresholds and my failure thresholds? In other words, how do I know when to stop? Right now, we've got hundreds of billions of dollars on a quarterly basis going into the development of data centers to be built around the country, some in your backyard. They're consuming water, they're consuming energy, electricity prices are going up, and as a funny twist of irony, a lot of the communities where these data centers are going, the people who have this stuff in their backyards really aren't even using AI. So there's an increase in electricity, they aren't using the stuff, and they're not sharing in the wealth. So make that make sense. For what purpose, to what end, and then the last one I just kind of gave you a quick preview, for whom might it fail? Remember I talked about our duty to care? Who are you caring for? If it's just you, I get it. Line your pockets, bruh. Do what you must, right? But you need to care about more than that. And I know, look, it's been a minute since I've been in business school, but I remember cash rules everything around me in business school, man. When I got out of business school, you know, cartoons like bling, 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 bling. I had big dollar signs coming out my eyes. That's all I was after. Show me the money. But I learned something along the way, which is that money is good, but only to a point. It does help. I am here to tell you that. I've seen the other side of no money. Money helps, but it's not everything. And so your duty to care has to extend beyond your pockets, right? So I'm going to just bring us all the way back to the beginning of this talk, where 7 companies are valued at more than the GDP of China, 1 billion people, of the European Union, 27 countries. So if at the end of this day, all of this AI discussion is about money, then it will be for naught. I need you all. I need you all, the future leaders and the shapers of future leaders, to make sure that is not the case. Again, I thank you from the depths of my heart for allowing me to stand here and spend some time with you, share some thoughts with you. I am looking forward to a robust Q&A, and if you want to keep the conversation going beyond today, QR codes and all that jazz are around, all right? Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you for your insightful discussion. You said earlier that when navigating the future of AI, we could think about either slowing down technology or speeding up culture. And I, for one, have a background in business and innovation and entrepreneurship, but I also am a poet and a community organizer. And so I am curious about how do we speed up culture?
That was a great line, by the way. I liked that. No, I wish I had an answer for you. I don't. I wish I could tell you that literacy, showing people fact patterns, giving people data to justify a position, telling people that their emotions should follow the data. I wish I could say that was the answer. But the reality is it's not. I tend to think these days that we are emotional creatures who think every now and then. And so I think the answer lies in story. Because, all right, so I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little long-winded for a second. So I was in Barcelona earlier this summer, and I was sitting on this bench, and I was looking at this statue. If you've ever been to Barcelona, there is no shortage of statues and structures and you name it. So this is one of many. And I was just kind of, I don't know why I was fixated on this thing. And I just started, I found out the name of it, and I started doing my search on it, like, who's this person? Why do they matter? Why is there a statue right in front of the ocean that I would much rather look at the ocean? But the realization occurred to me as I contemplated this more than I care to admit to you for probably the matter of a couple of weeks. Just kind of, some things just kind of make you meditate on them, whether you like it or not. And the thought occurred to me that structures like that are a direct function of belief. Whoever built that structure believed that this was an individual worthy of celebration. Let's call it that. Adulation. This was a prominent person to the people who believed it. And what I've come to realize even more so since that epiphany, which wasn't really quite an epiphany, all I had to do was go and look at some philosophers who've been saying this for thousands of years, which I later learned. Oftentimes it is those with power and their beliefs that build the structures, irrespective of the majority of others who may not share in that belief. That's called power asymmetry. And the reason that I harp on things like the Max 7, and look, I'm here for making your money. But again, I think we all have a role to play here to recognize that there is a power asymmetry that is occurring right now on our watch. And I think we all have a responsibility to at least say, hey, oh, over here, I don't believe that structure you're building. And I have a voice. I might not have as much power, but I'm not powerless. And so maybe if I use my voice and I talk to the person who's next to me and then the other person who's next to me and we say, you know what, maybe we ought to, I don't know, elect somebody who's going to say something different than the people who are saying things to them today. Or maybe I'm going to get on Instagram and just start spouting. I don't know, but do something other than sit around and talk about being afraid. So I would like to say the answer to speeding up culture is kind of doing all the academic stuff, but the reality is most people in culture don't come inside of rooms like this. And so we've got to find ways to talk to those people in ways that they understand, in ways that move them, that inspire them to some sort of action that is consistent with our beliefs and their beliefs. So you're a poet. Write something beautiful for us.
Yeah, my question was sort of still in that similar vein, thinking a lot about do we slow down tech or speed up culture, and sort of going more into this sort of power asymmetry that you mentioned. Is it realistic to think that a general populace could get involved in a way that has teeth around innovation and AI conversation? And I think about that mainly from the American lens, and everything that's going around or going on even around politics. And from this standpoint of arguably maybe we would have to slow down tech to get enough individuals educated in the realm of innovation, because I don't think it's just like it's power imbalance, but it's also knowledge gap, which is rooted in power as well. How do you navigate that?
That's a great question, and it's very insightful. Let's talk about a couple different things. First is the slow down tech part of it. When I say that, I am not suggesting that people who are developing just go home and do nothing, right? Again, I'm a technologist, people. I grew up as an engineer. I love this stuff. But I recognize that my interest is not the only interest. What I need other interests to do, such as regulators as an example, to say, you know what? The ability to create videos with real people's faces but fake bodies on them to be distributed on a pornographic site is off limits in our society. And therefore, if you have a technology that does that, stop. And if you don't, we're coming after you. Right? And no more of this hiding behind, give them some space. Like, stop. This is not what we want to permit in our society. It can be done. Guess what? I said I just came from Saudi a couple weeks ago. You ain't seeing that in Saudi. You will not see that in Saudi. Stuff will happen to you. Now, look, I'm not suggesting that's the way to go. But when we talk about the gears of slowing things down and what's necessary to slow things down, some other force of power that is equal to or greater than the powerful force of innovators has to say, yeah, no, that's not good. Right? All right, I won't turn this political. The other piece that's important there is the innovators themselves. Like, let's not let them off the hook. Let's not let me off the hook. I am accountable for the stuff that comes out of our company as it relates to how it gets used out in the world. So I need to anticipate. I have a whole team that is looking at how we might anticipate the use of technologies, thinking about it from a primary perspective, from a secondary effect, from a tertiary effect. What are the possible ripples that we can reasonably foresee? Now, I like to give this example. The people who make hammers are making hammers because they want you to hit nails with them. I'm pretty confident of that. You go to the hardware store, they're not selling you hammers so you can bust windows out or hit people with them, right? Can they reasonably foresee that possibility? That's when it gets a little bit of, challenging. But that's what they pay us for as business leaders, to make the choices to say, well, I'm not going to sell hammers anywhere other than hardware stores. I'm not going to have hammers just readily available next to the jail cell where, rival gang members exist. That's kind of a goofy example, but you get my point. Like, there are certain ethical choices that we have to make as business people. The other part I'll say, just to address the broader kind of societal bit related to your question, is we individually have a choice. If you don't like the things that fill in the blank company is doing, stop supporting them. It's kind of that easy, right? Hey, look, I've had a love-hate relationship with Facebook for a long time. Guess what? I'm not hanging out on Facebook like that. I'm not going to feed that machine. I'm not saying that that's what you have to do. It's me. I'm not. The light bulb that's lighting our room right now would not be here had it not been for individuals who said, I'm tired of this lantern, right? This whole gas flame thing is not working for me anymore, Joe, right? So I got to go see what Edison is talking about, right? It also wouldn't have happened had the infrastructure not been put in place, all the electrical grids that are necessary in order to propel the electricity into rooms like this one, right? But that wasn't individual, you and me just saying, I'm going to build me a nice power grid today, right? No, that was organization and corporation and government coming together. Well, the same is true now with AI. That's what these data centers are all about. I don't know if you've heard of the Stargate initiative that came out of the Trump administration. Like, it's all about giving money to the people who are making chips, building data centers so they can build out the new infrastructure. I mean, some might call that socialism, some might call it capitalism plus. I don't know, right? But that's what that is. It is building out infrastructure. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if you believe that our society has to modernize, right? But to what end? And what role do we have to play in claiming that end? So at the very least, you can say, you know what? If they're going to be in my backyard, I'm not going to be using this stuff, I'm going to vote no. You can do that at the very least. Or you can say, I love this stuff. Heck yeah, but let's make sure that, we aren't sending grotesque videos over Instagram and stoking violence in our neighborhoods. Like, we can make both of those choices. We may not be as powerful, but we are not powerless. And I think if there's anything that we should all walk out of this room with today, it would be that.
We all give Reggie a thank you. So, Reggie, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you all for being here. I will leave you with this one challenge. The word that resonates and keeps resonating is responsibility. And I actually challenge you all as you walk out the door to think of the one thing not what you're going to make other people take responsibility for, but as you think about what Reggie has said, what is the thing you're going to claim responsibility for about yourself? Right? Because it starts with us. And so if you don't leave today, what I'm worried about, you're going to leave and it'll be forgotten. So maybe before you stand up, take one moment and think about what it is that you're going to take responsibility for, given what you've heard today. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and thank you for the wonderful conversation. I appreciate it.